Pranam, everybody. Jai Janendra. We start the class with prayers as usual. Namo Orientanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukkaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabvesim Paramam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarusura Surendra Bahito Viramuda Sansrita Virena Vieta Swakarmani Cheyo Viraya Nityam Namah वीरातीर्थमिदं प्रौतमतलं वीरशघोरं तपो वीरेश्रीधृति कीर्तिकान्तिनिचय श्रीवीरभद्रं दिश अंगूठे अमृतवर्षे लप्तितणा भंडार श्री गुरु गौतम समरिये मनवांछित फलदातार. Welcome everybody. We are on the 10th class for Introduction to Jainism course today, and what I thought initially is that after a few weeks we could recap what we learned. so far. So what I'm going to do today is just review the topics that we have done so far, look at some of the questions that have come through in the past, and answer those questions that we had not answered before, and also give you the opportunity to ask any further questions today, um, and also try and understand for the future as to how we develop this course over the next few weeks. Sandeep and I have been in discussion about a date for the face-to-face uh, session at Oswald Center, and he has given me a few dates, and we need to try and work out which day is most suitable and then organize the session then. Um, and Sandeep will be in touch with the details of that as soon as that is organized. And I think that will give us all an opportunity to meet up, share some ideas, and depending on how it's arranged, maybe share a meal. And if it's a Oswald Center, then we could probably uh, incorporate a session on darshan on the same day. Let's see how it works out. Uh, we may have a few other uh, classes on Tuesdays before that live session, but more details of all this will be sent to you by Sandeep. Let me just share my screen, which gives us the details of the topics that we've covered so far. So we started off with the first lesson where we asked the question, why do we need a path? And who am I? That was the fundamental question, and we've kept on coming back to that because that is the most important question. The question of why do we need a path is, and I'm not sure whether the answer to the question, who am I, also answers that question, why do we need a path? But those are some of the themes that I was trying to develop. We briefly discussed ahimsa and anekantvad, that is the principles of uh, multifaceted truth, the principle of looking at things from all its different aspects and arriving at the truth, and also understanding that a statement without the qualification of from what angle the statement comes from does often create confusion and does make it difficult for us to understand and creates conflict. So if you are trying to explain something, and this is some of the things that we, even in the classes that we are doing, um, the context is sometimes explained in more or less an absolute term, but then as we explore the topic further, we bring in the various different aspects of it. We also then talked about aparigraha, meaning the principle of non-possessiveness, and the idea of understanding that anything that is not part of you, that is outside you, is actually something that you should not be attached to. And the idea of aparigraha is also central to Jainism. We then discussed the idea of being and trying to achieve the state of purity where we are completely by ourselves and we are not constantly pursuing something else, because most of our lives what we are doing is we are concentrating on getting things done and achieving something, but everything that we concentrate our efforts on is trying to is actually of a material nature, and everything that we try and acquire is generally of a material nature. So the concept of us abandoning all those other pursuits and understanding and concentrating on who we are, and also beginning to realize that everything that our hearts desire, all the happiness, all the fulfillment, all the care and concern is actually within us. That the soul does not need to seek outside, and the deeper we get to within ourselves, the happier and more fulfilled we would become. So we try to explore some of those ideas. Then on the fifth lesson, we again came to some questions, answers, and answering some doubts. Then the sixth lesson, we talked about Bhagwan Mahavir and Bhagwan Parshanath and their lives in very brief with some illustrations. Then we talked about the vows of Jain monks and nuns, and we then focused on the ritual of worship in a temple, and last week we talked about Nakar Mantra. Now, today we are going to just explore a few more ideas. Some of those will be explored further in answer to the questions that have been raised before. But at this stage, what I'd like to uh, ask people from the audience to share some thoughts on how this last 9 weeks have gone and what you have sort of learned, what questions have been raised in your mind as a result of what you heard. On a personal level, I have been given feedback by a few people. I was talking with one of the participants, I think yesterday, about a question that had bothered her about Panchindiya Sutra and some aspects of clarity of some of the terms that I had used. And that was a very useful conversation for me, but I hope equally useful for her as well. So there has been a lot of positive feedback from people. The questionnaires that you all kindly answered also shows that the majority of you are very positive about the content of this course. But what I would like
Sorry,
to
Ajit. Ajit. Can't hear you very well. If you
okay,
can be a bit closer to the mic.
okay, yeah, okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll bring the computer forward. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is actually ask anybody who has any questions or comments now to maybe raise their hands or put their question in the chat, and then I'll display some of the questions that have been shared before and we'll go through them in a few minutes. But I'll stop here for a minute and maybe invite you to share any particular concerns, questions that you might have. You still can't hear us, Neela?
Ajit, by your volume is still a bit low.
Okay.
I don't know whether there's been a settings issue or whatever.
Yeah, I think we've sorted that out before, but let me. Is that better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. So I've increased the volume on the audio. That's clear enough, yeah, Sandeep?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, any questions from anybody, including you, Meera, Kavit, Sandeep? Then I'll display some of the questions that were asked before.
I've not received any questions so far, Ajit Bhai.
Okay.
Can I suggest, Ajit Bhai, that if we do the slideshow questions first,
Okay.
and then get to the questions that people ask after?
Yeah.
All right. We'll do that. So, right at the beginning, I'm not sure exactly when these questions come, but came in. But over the 2 week, I got the questions that I had recorded over the last on 2 slides. So somebody asked a question, can you please explain about the 14 Rajlok? So very briefly, I'm sure you've all seen the depiction of the universe as explained by in our Shastras. And if you look at Oswald Center, the shape of that is laid out on the grounds, on the one end of which we have got the temple itself, the Derasar. The way it's described, the 14 Rajlok, is if you imagine a man standing with both legs apart and both arms on the waist and standing upright, then the universe from the bottom to the top is shaped in that way. That is what is called the Lok Akash. Now, Akash is space. Jainism talks about the 6 dravyas. So there are 6 elements in the universe, and Akash is one of those elements. It is divided into 2 parts, Lok Akash and Alok Akash. When we talk about the 14 Rajlok, we are talking about the Lok Akash. That means that area within which bodies can move. So that area within which a soul goes from one life to other, material, that is Pudgal, moves from one place to another. And there are elements which are 2 of the elements within this 6 that we are talking about, Dharmastikai and Adharmastikai, which allow bodies to move and stand still. So Dharmastikai is the element which allows bodies to move from one end to another, and Adharmastikai is the element which allows bodies to stay still in one place. These 2 elements are absent in the space outside this 14 Rajlok. Therefore, bodies cannot move in that space. So there is nothing in that space, and that is called Alok Akash. There is no limit to it. When a soul achieves nirvana, that means it leaves that body or their last body for the final time to reach up to Siddh Shila, they end up at the end of Lokakash over Siddh Shila and stay there permanently. They cannot move beyond that. Soul does not move beyond that because there is no medium that would aid movement in the Alokakash. Now, 14 Raj Loks, within Jain cosmology or geography, the area in the middle is called Madhyalok. The area above that is called Urdhvalok. The area below that is called Adholok. Madhyalok is where we are, and in Madhyalok you have got circles of land and water, land and water, land and water. The central circle that we are in at the moment is called Jambudvip. Jambudvip is a massive, massive area, but within Jambudvip, Bharat Kshetra, that is where we are in Dakshin Bharat, meaning the southern Bharat, which is at the bottom half of Jambudvip, that is why called Dakshin Bharat. And it is a small area of Jambudvip. Jambudvip itself is 100,000 yojans. A yojan is described in this context. So the number of miles in a yojan would vary depending on the context. But in this context, a yojan is described as about 3,600 to about 4,000 miles. The whole of Jambudvip is about 100,000 yojans. And the Bharat Kshetra that we call our home is about 526 yojans. The known world as we know it is actually much smaller than that. So a lot of the part of the Bharat Kshetra is more or less unknown to us. So that is the Jambudvip. Around that we got the Lavan Samudra. It's called Lavan. Lavan means salt because the sea is salty. Our seas are salty. So those are part of the Lavan Samudra, which is double in size to that. The size of Lavan Samudra is double that of Jambudvip. And around that there is another Dvip. Dvip means island, which is again double in size to Lavan Samudra, and around which in form of a ring there is another ocean, Samudra, which is double in size, and it goes on like that until the last ocean in the middle region, that is the Madhyalok, called Swayam Bhurmana Samudra, which is absolutely massive, as you would understand. And there are lots of texts on the descriptions of this, but the 2.5 islands, or dvip as we call it, and so they are not sort of, when we talk about islands, we imagine small islands. These are, in the terms of this Jain cosmology, they are absolutely massive. 2.5 of these are where all the 15 kshetras are located. That is 5 Bharat, 5 Airavat, and 5 Mavide. So that is the middle region. There are diagrams of this. I know some of you may be thinking that it's hard to imagine, but you may have seen diagrams. But at some stage, because this is not part of the course, we are just exploring something very briefly. So in the 2.5 dvips, we got 15 kshetras, from which out of in those 15 kshetras, Tirthankar Bhagwan's can be born, and there are other kshetras where human beings are present as well, but usually Tirthankars are not present. And there are lots of descriptions about those. The Devs live in the Urdhvalok, the regions above us, but there are spaces or homes of Devs in the region underneath us. So those are called Bhavanpati Devloks. And there are lots of description about that as well. And right below in the nether regions, that is the Adolok, below us, gradually beyond the space where the Bhavanpati Devloks are, if you go further down and down and down, there are the 7 hells. And in the upper regions, there are the Jyotish Chakra. The Jyotish Chakra is the suns, moons, stars, and beyond that, further up, there are the Devloks, and right at the top of that, we've got Siddhshila, which is the size of which is 45 lakh yojans. A lakh is 100,000. So 4,500,000. So that's, I think, 4.5 million. It is shaped like a disc, which is thick in the middle and thins out extremely thinly right at the end. And it is on top of this where all the Siddh Bhagwans reside at the end of the universe. They're called 14 Rajloks because the measure of space, the measure of the distance, is described in the terms called Rajju or Raj. That's why there are 7. We are in the middle. We've got 7 below and 7 above us. So in total, that is the whole space of the universe. The whole Lokakash is 14 Rajlok, but its shape and its distances at various levels because of the shape are different at different levels, where the person is standing with the arms by the sides, the 2 arms at that level, the distance is different. But we are talking about the the vertical at the top and the vertical at the bottom of the middle region. So 7 upwards and 7 downwards. So that is the answer to that question. The answer to that question took a long time, so I'll wait for a minute if that has raised any other questions.
Ajit, I think if you carry on moving through the questions, and then
Okay.
if people have any, they'll put them on the chat, or
Yeah, okay.
we'll take them at the end if we have the time then afterwards.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Anyway. Yeah. Is there a possibility that a soul which does not reach a state of samyaktva ever, and if so, would never attain moksha? Jainism describes 2 types of jeev or life. Those which are bhavya and those which are abhavya. My understanding is that there are probably very few abhavya jeevs. Abhavyas are jeevs are those who will never reach the level of purity or the level of get rid of their rag and dvesh to the extent to achieve samyaktva, and therefore will never go to moksha but will carry on being born in various different life forms and dying again, and they can reach some very high level states in Devlok, and they can become monks, they can become nuns, and they can achieve a very high level of spiritual development and powers, but all of that will actually be external, because within themselves, the effort and the level of purity that is needed is never actually achieved, so they would not achieve samyaktva. And partly because the true desire to achieve that and the understanding, the compassion, the realization of who we are is never actually realized for those jivs. And there are some examples of an Aupavya Jeev, and let me just give you one example that I am not sure whether we have recited his story before, but if you remember when we talked about Bhagwan Mahavir and King Shrenik, who will be the first Tirthankar in the next um, cycle in this Bharat Kshetra, we mentioned the fact that Shrenik Raja, the King Shrenik had asked Bhagwan Mahavir of his fate, of his soul after his life ended as King Shrenik, and Bhagwan Mahavir had told him that you acquired enough karma to take you to Narak, and you will be there. And King Shrenik had been very shocked and saddened and had asked for a solution so that that could be reversed. And Bhagwan Mahavir had tried to explain to him that that is an absolute karma that cannot be changed without you actually. You cannot get rid of it without you actually suffering the consequences of that. But King Shrenik kept on insisting, so Bhagwan Mahavir gave him three impossible tasks and said, look, if you can achieve this, then yes, it may be possible. So one of those impossible tasks was to convince a butcher called Kal Shaurik, I think it's called Kal Shaurik, to give up killing bulls just for one day. So this butcher was killing 500 bulls every day, and he was actually addicted to the violence and just couldn't stop that. So King Shrenik said, well, that's quite easy. He goes to him and says, I'll give you as much wealth as you want. Just stop doing this for one day. This man said, no, you can give me anything that you want, but I'll never stop doing this. I'm not interested in the money. So King Shrenik was desperate and says the only way to stop him, because he's the king, he imprisons that man and puts him in a deep well without anything there, obviously, and says, I am now imprisoning you for the next 24 hours. You are not going to be able to kill anybody. And King Shrenik thought that if I have imprisoned him, he's not physically going to be able to kill anybody or any animal or any bull. But this man needs that satisfaction, so he starts drawing bulls on the wall of this deep well and depicts him cutting each one of them or killing each one of them or beheading them. And when he is taken out the next day after 24 hours, King Shrenik thinks that he is accomplished because this man obviously was inside and there were no bulls there. But then when to examine the well itself, they discover that the man has in his mind actually been killing bulls. So he had not actually stopped his violence. So he is described as an Abhavya Jeev who would never achieve moksha and never achieve samyaktva. I think this next question is by the same person. Does one need to be a monk to achieve samyaktva? The answer is no. One does not need to be a monk to achieve samyaktva. A lot of people may achieve samyaktva as householders, and a lot of people may achieve samyaktva not even having taken any vows of a householder. And a lot of people who may have taken vows of a monk or a householder may not actually be in the state of Samyaktva. So you can be a monk, you can be a householder in the state of Mithyatva, meaning that you're not really realized your true state and your true self. Also, there are examples of people who have achieved Keval Gnan without having been formally into the fold of a monk. But obviously, as soon as they achieve Keval Gnan, their soul has elevated to that level of monkhood at the very highest level. And they would stay in that state, obviously, because they are now vitrag, meaning without any attachment and without any hatred. And they have achieved Keval Gnan, they've got rid of their Gati karma, there is a 4 great karmas, and they would spend the rest of their remaining life as Kevali Bhagwans or Arihants, but not Tirthankars, obviously. So they are Samanya Kevalis. So that is about Samyaktva. This question, if Jainism says there is no creator, then why does every major religion and philosophy say there is a creator? So I think we answered this question at the time that it was raised, but just very briefly we'll revisit this. If this is the truth, then why is it not more prominent knowledge and the status quo? So if I just come to the second part of this question, if this is the truth, then why is it not more prominent knowledge and status quo, meaning that everybody believes that? And I think we need to sort of sit back and reflect a bit that if we accept that what is true and what is right, then it should be out there in the open and that everybody should know about it. And the fact that the truth is actually not very well known, or the various aspects of the truth and the discussion or the statements of that in the multifaceted Anekantva, the Syadva, the terminology is not so well known. The idea that I'm getting here is that whoever asked this question thinks that if something is true, then it should be very obvious and everybody should know about it. Now, there's no direct answer to this question, but if we look at the kinds of truths that we have been aware of, so-called truths, and the whole world has believed them, and then gradually those truths have been modified and it has been then thought differently. But while those truths were prevalent, then it became a question of shame if you did not agree with those truths. So just a simple example, that when we were quite young, the idea that protein was essential to live a healthy life, and it was extremely important, and that anybody who was vegetarian was actually depriving themselves of essential nutrients and therefore harming their body. And I used to have to explain to people, and even now there are some people who would say, if you don't eat meat or eggs or fish, where do you get your protein from? And isn't that unhealthy? But the common knowledge now is that a vegetarian diet is actually healthier. That, and I think a lot of you must have heard Dr. Kumar Palpai Desai on Sunday. He talked a lot about vegetarianism, and there is more and more evidence of why being vegetarian is good for the environment. So the truth that was held so firmly and widely around is now being reversed. For those of you who have studied physics may know that there was a time when the smallest particle of matter was considered to be the atom. And the idea was that the atom is the smallest particle. There was nothing beyond that. And then scientists discovered protons, electrons, neutrons, and the idea was that those were the three fundamental particles. And some of you who may know a bit more about particle physics may realize that there are lots and lots of subatomic particles that have been discovered. And as far as I know, nobody yet knows which is the ultimate subatomic particle or the ultimate particle of which matter is composed of. Now, Jainism has always said that the smallest indivisible particle of matter is called param anu. And it's always said that that is beyond visibility by any means that humans can develop. And it is something that only a Kevali Bhagwant can visualize. So in terms of truth and how prevalent it is. So in my experience, there are lots of hidden truths that not many people know about. And a lot of those hidden truths are actually more important than some of the known truths which are actually sung about as being the absolute truth. And Jainism has always said that truth is actually contextual, meaning that if we say, so we started off this introduction with the statement that the soul exists, the soul is eternal. But if you go deeper into it, the soul exists, the soul is eternal, but in its association with the body, the soul or that life is actually temporary. But if you describe that the soul's association with the body is temporary, but the soul by itself moves from one body to another, and the soul in that context is eternal. There is no time in the beginning where it was not there, and there'll be no time in the future when it will not be there. So that is the full description. So in terms of truths and all that, some of the aspects of what so if you look at, say, creation, then in some context, you can say that the world was created. So Jainism also describes that when the next cycle, time cycle starts, some of the descriptions of how the world will actually begin to improve after it has been in a state of almost total destruction is similar to what the Bible describes as the day that God created the universe. So I think those of you who may have looked at, I think the part of the Bible which describes how the world came about. So on day one, God created this. On day two, God created that. So Jainism also describes of how this improvement in the Bharat Kshetras and the Airavat Kshetras, because they are the ones which go through a cycle of time of deterioration and improvement, and the way it actually begins to improve is similar to what Christianity has developed as the process of creation. So there are contexts there, and if you go deeper into most of the other religions, so if you go deeper into Hinduism, a lot of the descriptions about creation are symbolic. Some of you may have heard about those stories, say, from the Hindu aspects, and that symbolism is also very well explained by some great scholars. So it's something that requires a lot more study, and it's difficult to sort of answer that. And I don't have the full knowledge. I don't have a lot of knowledge about the uh, other philosophies and the detailed understanding of them. But some of our great monks have studied the Gita and the Upanishads and the Vedas in great detail, and some of them have been great scholars of uh, other religions as well, and they have described this elsewhere. This brings us to the next question. How does Jainism explain great personalities that Hinduism then discusses as Shiva, Krishna, Rama? Uh, Shiva is, Jainism describes Rudras, and Shiva is one of the Rudras. I'm not fully aware of the detail of that, but we need to explore that. Krishna and Ram are both uh, Krishna was a Vasudev, and his detailed story is part of the Trisashti Salaka Purush Charitra. There are differences in the versions of Jain Mahabharat and the Hindu Mahabharat, but there are lots of similarities as well. Similarly with Ram, Ram was the brother of Lakshman, who was a Vasudev, and Ram was a Bardev. And again, the Jain Ramayana is also a very detailed text. There's not actually Trisasya Shalaka Purush Charitra, which describes all the 63 lives in this time cycle, including the 24 Tirthankars, the Chakravartis, Bardevs, Vasudevs, and Prativasudevs. The stories of Ram and Krishna are all there. There are some differences in their the versions that you hear about in Hindu text as opposed to the Jain text. So this next question, and I'm really thankful to this person who put this forward. I'm lost. I don't understand a lot of the terms you're saying now or what they are. And my fear has been that this introduction has introduced lots of terms, and we have been going at a pace, just introducing ideas, and that could have made some of the course quite difficult for some people. But the feedback that we got was generally fairly positive for the majority. And what would be useful is to understand that if we have a separate stream for people who find a lot of this quite difficult, then we can actually introduce this subject from a completely different angle in a very, very simple format, just initially introducing some basic terms and then gradually exploring them. Next question.
Ajit Bhai,
Yeah.
we can just take one question that has come through.
Okay.
This is from Dipali Ben, and I'm just going to read the question.
Yeah.
Regular Samotsaran, certain places in India are temples with no trees in middle, including Potter's Bar, Derasar. How do you know which Derasar is a Samotsaran, or are they all or only certain places where a Tirthankar has been? Are there only a few of these types of places?
So I think there is a bit of confusion when I was describing the Samvatsaran temple in Palitana. It is a depiction of what a Samvatsaran looks like, and there's a temple there. The Samvatsaran depiction at Potter's Bar is outside the main temple. If you are facing the temple, it's on the left hand side where you can, and there is a murti of Guru Gautam there as well. What I was talking about is that every temple is a depiction of a Tirthankar Bhagwan sitting in a Samvatsarana. So the context is there, the shape and the description of the actual Samvatsarana that we have learnt about is not replicated in the temple. So when we go to a temple, we are there imagining that this is a live Tirthankar Bhagwan. If we see that parikar within the temple where the murti is sitting, that area around it, and that murti is one that has got Anjan Salaka, meaning the life has been poured into that. So for all purposes of worship, that is to be worshipped as a real Tirthankar, and we go there imagining that this is we have entered the Samvatsran and the Tirthankar Bhagwan is sitting there, we are worshipping them, and we are having a dialogue with them. So that is contextual, but the temples themselves are built in the standard format. What I meant was that you imagine that this is a Tirthankar Bhagwan sitting in the Samvatsran, but when I showed you a picture of a Samvatsran temple in Palitana, and we all have all seen the depiction of Samvatsran, this is the three circles on the left hand side, that is a Samvatsran. So I think you are probably referring to the fact that I said that we need to imagine that in a temple when we see Bhagwan Mahavir at Potus Bar, we have in our mind that I'm approaching our great Tirthankar and all the protocol that we would follow when we are actually in the presence of a great personality. So the kind of respect that we would show, and this would obviously be greater than the say if you were to go in the presence of King Charles and enter his presence or wherever in Buckingham Palace or wherever we're meeting them, then there is a certain protocol to be followed, and we would follow that religiously. There is a way to dress, there is a way to move, there are certain rituals sort of to follow. And similarly, we are entering the presence of a great Tirthankar in a place where they have set up the Tirth and are actually giving their discourses, have given their discourses. So it is that imagination that we got to apply there. Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, Kavit, go for it.
Okay. I've got another question that has just come through. Who is witness to our actions so as to determine the path of our soul?
Okay. Very interesting question. See, this comes from the idea that there is a regulator. There is somebody who will actually keep tabs on what we are doing and then reward us and punish us. So it comes from the idea that God gives and God takes away. God grants us good or punishes us for something bad that we've done. But the whole mechanism for all life is actually self-regulatory, meaning that there are rules which nature has actually some very clear rules of justice, which is completely fair and completely clear in the way it works. And Jainism describes the rules of karma, the acquisition of karma, what are the reasons for that, the stoppage of karmas, what are the reasons for that, the destruction of the karmas, what are the reasons for that, what do the karmas do to the soul. So constantly for us, there is this battle between who we are and what, as a result of the karmas that have clouded everything that we are. So Jainism talks about 8 different karmas which obstruct the 8 essential virtues of the soul. And that originally they were always there. And then as we escaped that life in Nigod, when one soul went to moksha, and we escaped that, and then we've been in circulation, we've had the opportunity to acquire more karmas, get rid of karmas, and suffer the consequences of that. And those are natural laws. Nobody has any power on changing them. So in that context, there is one simple, so where this idea comes from, that somebody is actually keeping tabs and somebody is rewarding or punishing us. Indra, at the time of Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvan, when it was quite near, Indra, the king of the Devas, observed or understood that at the time of Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvan, the position of the stars and the nakshatras and everything in the universe was setting, there was something called a Pashma Graha. So a particular constellation or a particular celestial body was moving into a certain position that by the science of Jyotish uh, told Indra that this is, if Tirthankar Bhagwan Mahavir achieves Nirvana just a bit later, then the effect of this Bhasma Graha would actually be reduced significantly. And he worries about that because the setting of the Bhasma Graha in his prediction meant that for about 2,500 years, Jain Dharma, or the Dharma itself, and the state of the world with respect to spirituality would actually deteriorate significantly. So he goes to Bhagwan Mahavir and tells him that, look, this is my knowledge, in my limited knowledge, this is what I am seeing, that this Bhasma Graha is going to set very soon. And if you delayed your nirvana by just a very few seconds, or even less than that, then the effect of this Bhasma Graha will be significantly less. And the world would be a much better place if that happens. So he's talking to Bhagwan Mahavir from that context of compassion for the life that was to follow. So Bhagwan Mahavir said that even Tirthankar Bhagwans cannot extend their life even by one samay, and that is an impossibility. He said, we do not have that power. So Tirthankar Bhagwans do not have that power. Every soul is subject to the effects of their karmas. So in answer to your question, who conducts us or who keeps tabs? Nature keeps tabs. And it's absolutely just. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is left unrewarded. Nothing is left unpunished. But we have an opportunity to amend things. Meaning, if there is something that is wrong and something that has happened, if we actually repent it, then the effect of that wrong will be lessened. And depending on how well we repent, it may be completely eliminated. And if we go deeper into self-realization, then a lot of those wrong things will have, the bad karmas will completely disappear. But the opportunity to change things is always within our grasp. It all depends on how much effort we put in. But nature doesn't forget any of it. So we can actually take a whole lesson on the laws of karma uh, at some stage, but that is a very, very long lesson. Anything else, Kavit?
Ajit Bhai, can I go back two questions? Can I go back two questions? You're
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
sorry, the slide after,
yeah.
where the first question was the person who's a novice and starting to zone out.
Yeah.
So just to give you a perspective from OAUK, all our listeners, we have taken the survey results into account, and we are likely to open or do a very beginners class in January. We're just looking at, I think both of us are looking for suitable teachers for that. So we may well have two classes from January.
Thank you, Sandeep Bhai.
Okay. So you can continue now.
Thanks. Sorry, somebody's looking for me urgently, but I'll finish in a few minutes. So the next question, and part of the question above that we have just answered, how can these Tirthankars be predetermined if no one even knows what actions of each individual soul will be, especially if we do not believe in a creator and we have free will? So when you talk about Keval Gnan, meaning the total knowledge of the past, present, and the future, the choices that each individual soul will make and the results of those choices and the karmas that they will acquire and what will happen, those things would be known in the knowledge of Keval Gnan, and that would be available not just to Tirthankars but all souls who have reached the stage of Keval Gnan. So they may be what are called Samanya Kevali, meaning ordinary Keval Gnanis, who will be going to moksha as well at the end of their current life. So how can the Tirthankars be determined? Because the future is known to those with that knowledge. But the choices that we make individually, there is a direction of travel, but everything that we do unfolds into our future, and effort is not wasted. So I think what we struggle with, that if the future is known, then what does it matter if you don't do anything? So that means if you wanted to cross a road which is busy with traffic, and we decide that nothing is going to happen to me because somebody has told me that I'm going to live 100 years, and you start crossing the road with a blindfold on your eyes, and you may be lucky, other drivers may be watching out for you and not run you over, and that may happen once, twice, thrice, and you may continue, but that cannot last forever because you are tempting fate. Now, Jainism says, for say in this particular context, about how long you're going to live. That in itself is variable. You may have a life expectancy according to the karmas that you acquired of 100 years. But that is not absolute. For most of us, that 100 years, the lifespan of 100 years, or the karma for those 100 years can be spent in 5 minutes if you put yourself into those ranges. So this particular kind of Ayushya karma is called Sop karma. So most of us have that kind of Ayushya karma, meaning that if we tempt fate, we are likely to actually end our lives earlier than what we expect. So those remaining 60 years or 40 years or 50 years of life left will be spent in that next 5 minutes. So, but a Keval Gnani would know what choice he would make. But we wouldn't know. So the whole purpose of our effort and our care and our building up on what we need to do is the gradual journey towards becoming better and better. But one of the things that Jainism says is that the more effort you spend in improving yourself, meaning improving your soul, purifying it, the greater the reward and the better your futures, meaning this future in this life and the other future lives will be. Okay. So free will is actually very important, and free will is something, the reasons why we are all sitting here having agreed to learn something more to try and improve ourselves. Moksha only open in the 5th and the 6th ara. No, in this time cycle, moksha actually from this place is closed in the 5th and the 6th ara, in this time cycle. The door to the moksha were open in the 4th ara, in this time cycle. When the time cycle is ascending, meaning things are improving and improving, then it follows a reverse order. But the road to moksha is always open in Mahavidya Kshetra when it's always as if it is the 4th ara. If there is no creator, then why do people have such spiritual experience connecting with a divine creator or chanting specific mantras, for example, Hare Krishna mantra, which is aimed at what they believe to be God? So a lot of the spiritual experiences are about people connecting with their own spiritual selves, and as Jainism and all religions, actually if you look deeper into Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma, you realize that even that is talking about the pure state of the soul, which is equivalent to a God when it is actually God. So the whole purpose of worship is to become like God. And when we go in front of a Tirthankar Bhagwan, we are witnessing what the state of their soul is, reflecting on the difference between their state and our state. Their state is vitarag, meaning without attachment, without hate, and what that state actually means. And then comparing that with the state that we are in, and then gradually not just understanding it in sort of verbal terms and contextual terms, but getting deeper and experiencing that I am internally, really speaking, similar to our Tirthankar Bhagwan. At the moment, I can't see that because I'm covered by X, Y, and Z. Bhagwan, I can't see you, but I recognize what you are. I can't see you because I can't see myself. I can't distinguish myself from my body. I still see the two as the same, as being indistinct, and all my efforts, everything that I do is focused on my body and my enjoyment and my relationships, but I forget that I'm going to leave all this behind and I'm going to go somewhere else. So the distinction between the soul and the body is something that is fundamentally what Samyaktva is, and that is fundamentally what spirituality is. And that is the purpose of almost all religious teaching. Final question, where were books like Bhagavad Gita then downloaded from, as there if it talks about ultimate God and creator? I think again, as I said earlier, if you go deeper into Gita, it actually, and you read the translations by scholars who have a deep knowledge of the Vedas and Sanatana Dharma, you will find the right context there. I think some of the deeper meanings are lost in the context. Gita describes a lot of the fundamental principles that Jainism is talking about as well. But I think, I haven't listened to it, but some of our great scholars and teachers have actually talked about the Gita, and I'm aware that Rakesh Bhai Zaveri has done a full-length series of discourses on the Gita, and I think CDs of that are available. So it may be useful to for the person, if you have deep knowledge of the Gita, to actually listen to that. So that was the end of my questions that had been sent to me, or those were distributed earlier.
Do we have time for any further questions?
Yeah, if you got any, we can.
Yeah. So Darshana Bentanani is asking, it is said that all souls have a purpose. What is the best way to navigate through this life in order to understand our soul's purpose?
I think the best way to navigate this life is to retain that knowledge and that understanding and continuously explore the fact that I am the soul and I'm different from the body, and understand the true nature of the soul. So something very simply, all life seeks joy and happiness. All life seeks knowledge. Happiness or joy is an inherent quality of the soul. All the soul's power are completely independent, non-dependent. So everything that one needs to feel absolutely blissfully happy is within itself. And if navigating this life, we find that we are constantly seeking solutions and we are constantly seeking satisfaction and we are constantly searching for fulfillment in things around us, in our careers, in our earning, in everything else, then keeping in mind this realization that if it is true that everything that is right and good for me is totally independent of anything else and it is within me, then all I have to do is not get attached to everything that is outside of me and consider it always being temporary and something that if it is good, it is as a result of my good karmas in the past, and those karmas and what I did to acquire them were not actually for my benefit. They couldn't be, because my purpose is to realize myself. and anything bad that I'm experiencing is as a result of any bad karmas that I have acquired in the past, and it is not due to somebody actually doing something bad to me. So, a true Jain, like we listen in uh, the story of Maina Sundari during the Ambil, the two Odis, is she absolutely clearly believed that anything that happens to her is as a result of her past karmas, and she was absolutely solid on betting her total existence and life on that fact. And it is that state of belief. Her father says, okay, if you believe that, I'm going to marry you off to somebody who has got leprosy. And if your belief is correct, then whatever happens to you will happen to you. And Maira Sundari gladly, completely, without any remorse, without any anger, without any disgruntlement, accepted that. So it is that level of commitment and conviction to the truth that we want to aim for. It is very difficult for most of us, but in navigating the life and learning about spirituality, I think that is a good way to start. Somebody is saying, can you explain the translation of devs? Devs are celestial beings. So in the four types of life, Dev Lok, Manushya Lok, Dev, Manushya, Tiryan, and Narak, devs are, we get to that state if you acquired a lot of punya karma, because generally speaking, materially, devs have a lot of material happiness and a long life, which is generally spent without much trouble. So that is Devs. And then Sonal is asking, how can we explain to non-Jains why we don't eat root vegetables? Simple. Root vegetables contain a lot of infinite amount of very tiny life, which is called nigod, and eating root vegetables kills a huge number of life, and we do not need to perform, we do not need that level of violence, and this is to reduce the amount of violence we have to do to sustain ourselves. So the purpose of Jainism is to be as non-violent and as ahimsak as possible, and root vegetables are not essential. Everybody can live without them. So if we don't eat them, that is in the practice of non-violence or ahimsa. And the question may arise that you cannot see those animals. Are you talking about bacteria? No, we are not talking about bacteria. We are not talking about the very life. Say, for example, a pin head size of potatoes has an infinite number of lives within it. So that is what our Shastras describe, and that is not visible on a microscope. That is not the kind of life that science knows about at the moment, because science has no concept of nigod, no concept of anekant, sort of life that shares, I mean, infinite number of lives sharing one body. So science has no concept of that. Then there is the next question. Okay, I think that was it. So those are the
Okay,
questions that I
Ajit
was
bhai, we are
thinking.
near the end of our
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say one more thing once you've actually finished. And then, yeah.
So just 1 second. Next slide. Okay, so the last two slides are just basically about sum up now. If I've said anything in the answering your questions today and in this class today that is against the teaching of Jainism, I ask for forgiveness by thought, speech, and deed. Manusankayati Michami Dukudam. Sarvamangalamangalyam Surakalyan Karanam Pradhanam Suratarmanam Jainam Jeti Sasanam. Okay, go on, Kavit.
Okay. Basically, we're trying to organize an in-person class. We've got some dates which have come through. The chances are it is likely to be in January or towards, if we can do it in December, we will, but more than likely it will be in January. So just watch this space. I will write to all of you either on the WhatsApp or email or both. And it would likely to be on a Saturday. So we will do that session with 3 or 4 of our lecturers, etc. So keep an eye open for that. It will be a great session for 4 or 5 hours, including lunch. Yeah. Apart from that, thank you all for coming every Tuesday. You know, you can re-listen to the YouTube afterwards as well. So, but thank you all for your commitment and making these classes a great success as well. We've got other things happening in the new year, which I'll keep you posted on, new initiatives. Thank you. And thank you, Ajit Bhai.
Okay, we can end the session now.
Yeah.
Yes.